Right now I have this urge to do this thing, but like, it's a public park. I don't want to make a fool of myself, but nevertheless, I'm still gonna make a fool of myself. Watch me. To be, or not to be, what it is nobler in the mind to suffer, and by opposing to end them to die, to sleep. I think that was a pretty decent effort. I am so glad. I'm so glad no one pulled me over yet. I mean, the human equivalent of pulling over is probably getting arrested, but I rest my case. Welcome back to another video coming at you from my local park, and that is a tree. Yes, and I am under the shades of trees. And today we're going to talk about William Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is a very tricky person to tackle. Shakespeare's, in fact, one of the trickiest authors I've ever read. Using the word read is already, we're already starting on the wrong track if you use the word read for Shakespeare or Shakespearean play scripts. So in today's video, I just really want to get across one thing, and if you can get this one thing right about Shakespeare, it's gonna solve like 90% of your problems. Like, it's mad. So the one key insight, or the one critical mistake, or like amateurs of Shakespeare or novices of Shakespeare make, is that they treat this thing as a novel, right? I think I've talked about this before in another video of mine, but I just feel like this is such an important point that it deserves another separate video. Even though the form factor, when you go to a bookstore and you buy a Shakespeare, even the form factor is the same as a novel. I mean, this is Hamlet. So this is like, it looks like a book that you can read, but the minute that you flip open this book, you realize that this is nothing like a novel. It's written differently, the language is kind of weird, and their stage instructions, you're just like, what the hell is going on? Most people struggle with Shakespeare because they don't understand this one point, which is that Shakespearean scripts are not novels for you to read. I mean, you can read it as a novel, but fundamentally, it is a blueprint for performance. And the form novel, or the form literature and performance, even though on the back of this thing it says Penguin Literature, but it's actually really different. Performance is more of a temporal form. That means it passes by, it just kind of goes, and it just kind of disappears. It's kind of like a musical performance. You never attend a musical with the purpose in mind of dissecting the musical, right? You never attend like a symphony, orchestral performance just to analyze the crap out of that piece. I mean, if you're a professional musician, fine, like you can analyze the crap out of the piece. But if you're just like a normal person that wants to enjoy the drama, or like the human elements, or like the Shakespearean elements, you don't have to analyze it that deeply. This right here is an instruction manual for a very temporal sort of performance. So it should be something that passes by you, but it shouldn't be something that's just kind of like you need to hold on to every word of it. But literature, on the other hand, is a bit different, because literature demands you to read between the lines. Literature demands you to decode the meaning of the authors. Literature demands you to, analyze specific word choices. Like, why not this word? But for Shakespeare, because this is performance, because this is actually not the performance itself, this is a play script of a performance. That means you need to treat this thing like music. You need to let it flow through your ears. You need to imagine the performance in your head. And that's why it's probably crucial for you to actually see the play and performance instead of just reading it like a piece of literature. For Shakespeare, nothing's ever set in stones. I mean, you can probably argue that, hey, like, this is from the folio edition, like, this is something that should be set in stone. Actually, Shakespeare shouldn't really be treated with that elitist lens. Like, the question of, like, whether Shakespeare actually wrote his plays is still up for debates. Actually, the first quarto of Hamlet, they weren't written by Shakespeare. It's not like Shakespeare sat down to write this entire quarto of instructions. In fact, most of the first quarto, which is the bad quarto of Hamlet, was actually composed by the various actors on the stage. So there were a lot of silly mistakes in there. There were a lot of just like obscure things in there that's not in the final folio edition. And even when you consider it as set in stone, like I've got the Oxford Shakespeare, even if you consider that Shakespeare as something that's like set in stone, I'm sorry, it's not set in stone. God knows how many academics had their hands on the script. God knows how many times they've edited through the entire thing just to make it something that's readable or like performable. Every performance of Shakespeare is a different interpretation, and this right here, this is just a blueprint. So when you're tracing your eyes across the words, don't analyze every single sentence and every single word like they matter. I mean, they don't really matter. Like, all of the words on here, this is probably not even the original Shakespeare. This is probably not the original script. So when reading Shakespeare, don't worry about the specifics. Don't worry about the nitty-gritties. Don't do like close analysis of passages, or like don't recite a bunch of stuff, because that's not gonna help you. Read for the dramatic elements. Read for like the human stuff. Like stuff like how Shakespeare portrayed characters, how Shakespeare writes a comedy, or how Shakespeare frames specific scenes, because that's actually the meat of Shakespeare. It's not the fancy language, it's not like the sophistication, but it's just very raw, kind of enjoyable theater experience. It's a performance. In essence, it's a performance that's designed to capture your attention. If you find it boring at first, that means you just haven't found, you know, an interpretation that really speaks to you. And find contemporary films that allude to Shakespeare so you can understand the dramatic elements. And if you read the play in conjunction with your hunt for great adaptations, that's just gonna like enrich your experience of Shakespeare. When you meet people, you can just say, hey, I actually really love Shakespeare. I don't pretend that I love Shakespeare, but I actually do like Shakespeare. In summary, don't read this thing like a novel. It's a performance, and you need to treat it as a performance. It's fleeing. It's designed to be enjoyed, otherwise people wouldn't pay for them, and you need to give them the benefit of the doubt. And just strap in, dive in, see what happens. Don't read close analyses before you tackle Shakespeare. It's just like background knowledge before I tackle Shakespeare. You don't need to do that. Dive in. It's a very human experience. It's a performance. It's ever fleeing. I love it, and I think you will too if you take my advice. Anyway, that's all I have for the Shakespeare video, and I hope you guys are having a great week so far. I don't know, catch you guys in the next one.